All right, members, thank you so much for your kind attendance today. I've been doing a bunch of work to put on this meeting and thought that it was critical that we take the opportunity to hear from some of the companies that provide voting software and equipment. Mr. John Polis from Dominion Voting Systems was kind enough to agree to come in. The other two companies that have been serving Michigan did not agree to come in at this point. And perhaps that will change in the future, but at this point, they were unwilling. Members, it's my intention today that, or my expectation really, that Mr. Polis and your questions will probably take us longer than an hour. And so at 1 hour or approximately there, we'll take a 15-minute break for everybody to stretch their legs and catch their breath and regroup after that. And if it ends up taking a little longer, then that will build in another break so that everybody can take those necessary times to clear your head. So at this point, I think we're ready to hear from Mr. Polis. John, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And with you, you have Mr. Brower, who I assume is your attorney?
Our company's attorney, yes, that's correct.
Very good.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Brower. Thank you. John, at this time, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much. Mr. Polis, please go ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair McBroom and distinguished members of the committee. I appreciate the chance to be here today. My name is John Polis, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of Dominion Voting Systems. Dominion is a U.S. company headquartered in Denver, Colorado. I founded my company in Canada more than 18 years ago. By 2010, our business had grown in the United States, and we moved our headquarters to Denver, Colorado, and voluntarily worked with the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States to ensure they knew who I was. By 2018, the majority of our business, our customers, and employees were in the United States, and I sold the company to U.S. investors. This has all been publicly disclosed to Congress in sworn affidavits. Dominion proudly provides voting systems and services to jurisdictions across 28 states and Puerto Rico. I agree with the importance of the issues being raised today by the chair and ranking member regarding election integrity. At Dominion, we take great pride in the limited role we play in elections, and we want to assure voters that they can have confidence in the accuracy and reliability of their voting systems. We go to work every day cognizant of this important responsibility. Unfortunately, Dominion has recently been thrust into the national spotlight as part of a dangerous and reckless disinformation campaign aimed at sowing doubt and confusion over the 2020 presidential election. A lot of things have been said about Dominion systems, and I'm going to address as many of them as I can, as well as answer your specific questions. But the most important thing to understand about Dominion is this: we do not run elections. Our role is limited to providing a local election offices with the machines they need to run elections. After election officials have determined who is eligible to vote, we provide the machinery for voters to mark their ballot and for election officials to accurately tally those ballots. Election officials report those tallies publicly and store the original paper ballots securely. Those ballots are preserved so that election officials can double check from the tallies in our machines at any time. Again, all the tabulator does is count the votes from the paper ballots that have been created and securely cast by the voters. The number reported by the machine can always be compared to a hand count of those original paper ballots. People can speculate about votes being switched or secret algorithms or glitches, but if any of that were true, the paper ballots wouldn't match the machine count. We are very serious about providing our customers, state and local governments, machines that accurately count ballots, and at the end of the day, the counts from our machines match the physical ballots that are stored. Those people making baseless claims surely know that they are lies, but many honest Americans see them proliferated on social media and they believe them. These lies have consequences. Death threats have been leveled against state and local officials, my company's employees, and even against my family. The largest threat, however, has been on the assault on the confidence in America's democratic process. It is critical to set the record straight today on several of the most persistent lies. First, there were no switched or deleted votes involving Dominion machines. All 2020 election audits and recounts conducted thus far of Dominion technology have validated the accuracy and reliability of the results. There are no algorithm that enabled fractional voting. The Election Assistance Commission, a bipartisan federal agency, provides for the accreditation of independent, non-federal laboratories that are evaluated and recommended by the National Institute of Standards and Technology to test and qualify voting systems pursuant to HAVA Section 231, subsection B1. Among other things, these test labs perform complete source code reviews on every federally certified tabulation system. States replicate this process for their own certifications. Numerous election security experts from both sides of the aisle, including the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, and secretaries of state from across the country and from both parties, have affirmed that there are no evidence and voting machines were not corrupted to alter this election. Specifically, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency stated, quote, "There is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised." Our company works with all U.S. political parties, and our customer base and government outreach practices support this nonpartisan approach. In fact, we submit extensive company disclosures to federal and state authorities as terms of product testing, system certification, and ownership information. Dominion is a private American company that provides voting systems in 28 states, regardless on whether they are blue or red states. Dominion voting systems did not now, nor has it ever, used SolarWinds Orion platform, which was the subject of the DHS emergency directive dated December 13, 2020. Dominion is not and has never been a front for communists. It has no ties to Hugo Chavez, the late dictator of Venezuela. We have never been involved in Venezuelan elections. Its machines have never been used in Venezuela. The company also does not have any ties to China whatsoever, including no ties, including investment or source code transfer. There are no ownership ties to any political parties, nor to foreign governments. Dominion has no ties to the Pelosi family, Feinstein family, Clinton family, or George Soros. Additionally, Dominion does not have any servers in Germany or Spain. No votes are sent overseas. Let me be clear. Ballots aren't sent anywhere, not overseas, not over state lines, and not even over county lines. All votes are counted by local, bipartisan U.S. election officials in the United States. The U.S. Army has debunked claims of secret military raids overseas. Additionally, voting systems are, by design, meant to be used as closed systems that are not networked, meaning they are not connected to the internet. It is technologically impossible to see votes being counted in real time or to flip them. The comments about our company being started in Venezuela with Cuban money with the intent to steal elections are beyond bizarre and are complete lies. My company started in my basement, which happened to be in Toronto, and our only intention was to help blind people vote on paper ballots. Our very first public demonstration was in 2003 for a city on the other side of the Ambassador Bridge, and my partner and I made a weekend of it and watched the Lion game. Both turned into disappointing losses. No Cuba, no China, no Venezuela. Dominion does not have any ties to Smartmatic. Dominion and Smartmatic are two separate companies. We do not use or license Smartmatic software. The extent of our relationship is this. In 2009, Smartmatic licensed the use of a Dominion voting machine for use in the Philippines. That agreement is long over, and they no longer have the ability to use any of our intellectual property, and we certainly do not use any of their intellectual property or source code. The other event about our history that many are wrongfully conflating as proof of a relationship between Dominion and Smartmatic involves the assets that Dominion purchased from Sequoia Voting Systems in 2010. Let me be clear on this. We didn't purchase anything from Smartmatic. Sequoia's voting history went back over 100 years in various different names and had dozens of different owners through those years, including, for a brief time, Smartmatic, who I believe owned Sequoia between 2005 and 2007. When they fully divested in 2007, it is my understanding that they documented to CFIUS that the fact that they had no ongoing control in Sequoia. At no point did we at Dominion acquire Smartmatic source code or IP, nor do any of our customers use any of their intellectual property in our systems. I will not be commenting today on employees, whether full-time, part-time, or single-day contractors, or past employees. And that is simply due to safety concerns. You can ask me what you'd like about what we do or about myself, but not our employees. Dominion employees are facing harassment and threats against personal safety due to the false allegations of recent weeks. We are working around the clock to address issues with law enforcement and take every measure we can to ensure the safety of our employees. But I will say this, no Dominion employee has given me any reason to suspect that they have or would do anything to try to alter an election outcome. But what's even more important for you to know is that it would not be possible for them to do so. These falsehoods I've just listed are only a sampling of the most egregious lies. The disinformation campaign being waged against Dominion defies facts or logic. To date, no one has produced credible evidence of vote fraud or vote switching on Dominion systems because these things simply have not occurred. I would now like to explain further Dominion's roles in election. It is important to know that Dominion is never able to affect the outcome of an election. Dominion does not handle voter registration, poll books, or signature verification. We don't supply software or equipment for these services. We don't provide vote-by-mail services, and we don't control or secure voters' paper ballots. We have no role in verifying the eligibility of voters. These are the jobs of bipartisan poll workers and local election officials. Long before Election Day, before we sell our equipment, our voting systems undergo an accreditation process run by the EAC. The process involves compliance with all voluntary voter system guidelines, including standards for secure software design, such as software independence. Dominion systems must be tested by an independent, federally accredited laboratory, and Dominion must disclose its ownership, system source code, reviews, and all component and hardware sourcing information to the EAC. In addition to federal certification, Dominion submits to additional rounds of testing and disclosures in order to get certified in the 28 states in which we operate. Once we sell our equipment to local officials, the machines are under their control. In many circumstances, source code is delivered by hand by state certification officials. Officials keep rigorous chain of custody logs. This is how election officials ensure that equipment is not tampered with. What's more, our systems require a paper ballot that is always in the custody of the local election officials. While we do ensure trained technicians are available on election day, should local election officials need support resolving issues, at no point are local election officials not in control of voting machines. If any Michigander is looking for confidence in the vote counts, beyond looking to the chain of custody and the certification checks and balances, they can always look to the hand count audits and recounts. Now let me talk about Michigan specifically. Michigan law requires voting systems to be approved by the Michigan Board of State Canvassers and certified by an independent testing authority. Tabulation systems, including Dominion's, must pass a rigorous testing and certification process to meet the state's robust standards before they can be used. Ahead of the election, local officials conduct logic and accuracy testing with bipartisan observers present, ensuring tabulation equipment and the specific election data files perform properly and accurately. The precinct voting process administered by local election officials varies from state to state and can vary from county to county. I would like to provide a general outline of how the process works. After testing and sealing vote tabulators, vote units are delivered to the polling location. Election morning, bipartisan poll officials perform the following tasks. They unlock and unseal the ballot box that sits beneath the tabulator to verify there are no paper ballots in the ballot box. Poll officials then seal that ballot box. Poll officials verify the physical seals on the tabulators and the BMDs against the list provided by the jurisdiction's election administrators. Tabulators and BMDs are then powered on. Using an encrypted security key and password, the poll officials electronically open the polls. A zero-proof report is printed, often with multiple copies, for posting at the location and to hand out for bipartisan poll watchers. This confirms that no ballots have been cast on the units. Throughout the day after voting begins, voters check in with poll officials in order to verify their registration on an electronic or paper poll book. This process does not involve any Dominion system. Voters make their choices on their ballot, either through hand marking or via an electronic BMD device, which simply generates a voter-made paper ballot. Voters then review their paper ballots and carefully look at their choices and insert those paper ballots into the tabulator, which sits atop the physically secured and sealed ballot box. At the close of voting, poll officials perform the following task. Using an encrypted security key and password, poll officials electronically close the polls. A results tape is printed with multiple copies for posting at the polling location and to hand out to poll watchers. This confirms the turnout and the vote totals for all of the ballots that have been inserted into the tabulators by voters. For the BMD, there are no results, since it's simply a mechanism for voters, including voters with disabilities, to make ballot choices and create a paper ballot. For the few jurisdictions, less than 1% of our customer base, an external cellular modem is required. In our case, we specifically designed the modem to be external to allow all poll watchers to easily and readily know whether it is connected. In the counties where it is required, the modem is connected to the tabulator after the polls are closed, after the seals are removed, to transmit unofficial summary results to the jurisdiction's central location. Upon completion of that transmission, the external modem is removed. The ballot box is then unsealed and unlocked, and the paper ballots are removed from the ballot box and manually accounted for by poll officials, including reconciliation with the poll book voter numbers. The seal is removed from the door containing the tabulator's removable memory device. The removable memory device, together with a copy of the results tape and the paper ballots, are sealed in a transport container. That transport container is transported securely by poll officials, sometimes accompanied by sheriffs, to the jurisdiction's central location. As a reminder, none of these actions are performed by Dominion employees. Election administrators at the jurisdiction's central location will accumulate the electronic results, regardless of whether they have been unofficially transmitted through modem or not, from the tabulator's removable memory devices. Accumulation occurs on a closed network computer system. Election night unofficial reports will be generated by the election officials, and canvass process begins to reconcile all election data, and in particular ballot counts and the voter registration poll book numbers, indicating how many voters were processed and how many ballots were counted. After canvass, the jurisdiction certifies the election to the state. Again, throughout this period, The actual paper ballots created by voters are locked and stored under the complete control of local election officials and are available at any time to check against machine tallies. After the election, officials run an even more thorough set of procedures to verify the accuracy of the vote counts, including risk-limiting audits and random recounts conducted by hand within the public view. Above all, the most important check on our machines is the paper ballot. Michigan has paper ballot records for every vote cast on a Dominion machine. The proof of our machine's accuracy is in these paper ballots. If there was any manipulation of the system, the paper ballots simply would not match the machine totals. Moreover, if unauthorized votes were somehow added to the count, those numbers would not match the canvassing numbers. Despite Michigan's rigorous election security protocols, disinformation persists. This has been nowhere more apparent than in Antrim County, where this week a severely flawed report was released by a biased, non-independent organization alleging election switching. It is categorically false and technically incomprehensible, let alone possible, but at its broadest, the report alleges that votes were switched using Dominion's digital adjudication system and ranked choice voting. I have difficulty knowing even where to begin on this. Michigan does not use ranked choice voting. A simple review of Antrim's ballots easily confirms this. More importantly, an independent review by an EAC certified test lab, any of them, could easily verify this. Secondly, none of Antrim's tabulators were connected to the internet. Antrim County does not have modems. They do not use modems. Finally, the adjudication claims are entirely false. Let me take a minute to explain this bizarre claim. First off, adjudication only occurs on absentee ballots and only in states that require it. A voter making a mistake on an absentee ballot is an age-old problem. A common mistake is when a voter fills in the wrong oval and then tries to correct it by filling in another oval and drawing an X or a scribble through the first. This is what election experts call an overvote. In some states, it's considered exactly that and no vote is counted. However, in some states, like Michigan, bipartisan review committees are asked to review these ballots for common mistakes such as the one I just described, to see if they agree on voter intent. All decisions are made by local officials and a bipartisan committee. In some counties, election officials do this using a digital adjudication system, whereas other counties conduct this process manually by creating new ballots when needed. With digital adjudication, the original ballot is never changed, and a full audit trail shows the original image, shows who the bipartisan adjudicators were and what they agreed on, and ultimately captures any changes that they made per state or local law. In Antrim County, ballots were reconciled manually. What the report is alleging is impossible because Antrim County does not license, nor do they use digital adjudication. Furthermore, digital adjudication doesn't even work without the use of ballot images. Antrim County did not record absentee ballot images. Any US EAC accredited voting systems testing laboratory can easily and independently verify whether adjudication is or was used at any time. As Michigan's Director of Elections stated in a court filing in response to this report, quote, "The report makes a series of unsupported conclusions, ascribes motives of fraud and obfuscation to processes that are easily explained as routine election procedures or error corrections, and suggests without explanation that elements of election software not used in Michigan are somehow responsible for tabulation or reporting errors that are either non-existent or easily explained," end quote. I should note that isolated incidences of human error do occur in elections. And this is what happened in Antrim County on election day. And this indeed is the reason we're now talking about Antrim County. And it has to do with a series of human errors. Specifically, an October change to the election required a new election project to be created. As part of this process, every tabulator had to be updated with the new election project. The first human error occurred when election officials didn't update all of the tabulator memory cards. The second human error occurred when election officials forgot to conduct the public logic and accuracy testing on the final election project. Both of these errors were compounded when the programmer of this election took specific steps to ensure that the original ballots from the September project that were already printed could be used in the tabulators not affected by the addition of the school board race. If all of the tabulators had been updated as per procedure, there wouldn't have been any error in the unofficial reporting. If public logic and accuracy testing had taken place, the error would have been caught when it should have been caught prior to the election. If steps weren't specifically taken to salvage the already printed ballots, the system would not have allowed election officials to upload memory cards, and the reporting error never would have occurred. Human mistakes happen, especially in busy election years when election officials work tirelessly through weekends and holidays for months on end, which is even more difficult in small counties where there is a lack of dedicated election staff. This year in particular, with the difficulties compounded by the pandemic, this is exactly why canvass procedures exist, which of course, where this error was quickly identified and corrected. Because our systems in Michigan use paper ballots, the accuracy of the tabulation machines can be proven by hand counts and audits. As the Michigan Secretary of State office has already announced, this week, the Bureau of Elections in Antrim County will conduct a hand count of all ballots cast in the presidential election. This will verify that our system counted votes accurately. Those making unfounded allegations against Dominion are selective in their expressed concern. For example, they ignore that in several key battleground states, the president got more votes on Dominion systems than in other jurisdictions. Some of the requested recount sites, such as Philadelphia and Milwaukee, were not even Dominion customers at all. I will close by reminding everyone that all Dominion machines in battleground states produce voter verifiable paper ballots and records for review. These paper ballots for every vote cast are preserved and secured by the local election officials and are overseen by representatives from both parties. If there was any manipulation of the system, the paper ballots would not match the machine totals. Moreover, if unauthorized votes were somehow added to the count, those numbers would not match the canvassing numbers. As one example, the recent hand count in Georgia of 5 million votes matched our voting machines tallied perfectly, showing that our machines counted accurately. I was asked recently what I thought about the Georgia hand count, and my reaction is always one of enthusiasm. A hand count is the most certain way of proving that our systems work. We welcome recounts because they prove the value of our systems. This indisputable fact is a key redundancy of our voting process that will undoubtedly continue to serve as the basis for truth and transparency in the 2020 election and beyond. I appreciate the opportunity to testify at this official hearing under oath about our company and how we worked in the 2020 elections. We have yet to see our critics make their allegations under oath, as I'm doing here today, or to bring any real, independent, fact-based evidence forward. Thank you again, and I'm now happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Polis. I'd like to start with some questions regarding the Antrim situation, if I may. And I'd like to have a better understanding of how exactly the error occurred. And so, and what I want to specifically drive at is your statement about how if the logic and, is it error, logic and error test?
Logic inaccuracy test.
Logic and accuracy test. If that had been run, that this would have been caught. And so is it correct to state that the error that occurred in the unofficial results didn't occur at the tabulators, but occurred when the information was taken to the centralized location and uploaded off of the memory cards that were in the tabulators? Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair McBroom. So the first thing that I will say is my information is Dominion did not support Antrim County. We did not program their election. We don't have a copy of their database. We don't have any copies of what happened there. But what I do know, I will walk through. So from my understanding, the county originally signed off, finalized, and tested their programming. And I believe that they did a public logic and accuracy test, but I believe they did it in September after the original programming. Once that was completed, my best guess at this time is that they sent their ballots off to be printed. At some point in October, they were required to add a contest on ballots that I believe affected 3 of their 18 tabulators. I believe it was a school board contest. New programming was provided to the county, along with instructions to update all 18 of their tabulators. This is where the first human error occurred. Antrim is a small county, as you know, in the Upper Peninsula, and election officials forgot to update all of their 18 tabulators' memory cards. This type of human error is mitigated when the counties can afford to arrange for on-site support, for example, but as my understanding was, there wasn't any on-site technical support in Antrim County. This type of human error, I should point out, of election programming happens from time to time, and it's the entire purpose of why we have public logic and accuracy testing, because this process, which is a requirement in states including Michigan, the test entails zeroing every tabulator that's going to be used in an election. Officials in front of public view feed a known test deck of ballots into the tabulator. Once they're done that, they close the poll, they print the results tape, they upload the results into the database, and then they ensure the results that are being reported are in fact the expected results. It's specifically designed to be used in a public forum. So at the conclusion of this process, once it's verified, the tabulators then are re-zeroed, sealed, and made ready for election deployment. So performing that step would have caught the first human mistake, but this step was unfortunately missed, which is the second error. Those two are not even enough, because those two errors, which happened one after another, were compounded by the way the election update was programmed. During the October programming update, the contracting firm used by Antrim took care to program the new tabulation files to allow Antrim to salvage the original ballots that were already printed, except for the ballots affecting the new school board race, which I believe were 3 tabulators. This is the only reason why any memory card that was mistakenly not updated could be uploaded for the unofficial tally.
Thank you. So what I'm trying to get at specifically, Mr. Polis, is how do we verify whether the mistake is made in the programming at the tabulator versus at where the memory cards are taken to? And so, and tell me, during the logic and accuracy, is that done? I mean, I know you run the stack of ballots through and then you print a slip up on the tabulator to make sure that it accurately counted the ballots. But is there a time then when the results are taken from the tabulator to the central location to make sure that that transmittance of the data is also done accurately too?
Best practice involves reviewing the results that are uploaded via the memory cards and comparing them to the results tape that are printed immediately upon polls close. And again, multiple copies posted publicly in the polling location and distributed to any poll watchers. And you verify that the results tape matches what has been uploaded. In this particular case, the first 2 errors happened, and because the system was told to accept memory cards from either one of those 2 projects, it allowed an upload from the September programming, even though it was expecting a memory card from the October programming.
Okay. And does the software that those cards are taken to, at the central location, or if the data is transmitted via modem, the software at the other end that's receiving those data points, is that your software or is that someone else's software?
Yes, the software that resides at the central location is our software.
Okay. And then is it possible for that data to also be transmitted to other types of programming such as Excel spreadsheets?
So that system is designed as a standalone system, but those results obviously have to be transmitted to a central location at the state level and reported to the media. So there are several ways that election officials can generate results and reports. One of them is Excel, one is through PDF, et cetera, so that the unofficial results can be exported to the state, to the media, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the committee want to ask questions? I'll share the microphone here. Okay, Vice Chair Lucido, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Polis. Are you still CEO of Dominion?
I am.
And Dominion stands for what? Is this just a name you gave it, or is there any?
It doesn't stand for anything. It's just a name.
Okay. Dominion Voting Services has been around 18 years. 2002, you opened up in Toronto, Canada.
We were formally incorporated in January 2003 in Toronto, Canada.
You stood there for a couple years and then moved the operations to Denver, Colorado.
We moved our headquarters to Denver in 2010.
You're currently doing business in 28 states that you operate here in the United States?
Correct.
In those 28 states, approximately, well, let me go to this. Let's just deal with Michigan right now. You have about, you have a contract for each and every one of these units that you place in service in these counties in which the votes are taken?
I'm not familiar off the top of my head, but I believe we have a contract with the state, and then we very well may have separate contracts with counties. But I believe our original contract was with the state entity.
So the state of Michigan gave you a contract to go ahead and use, and I'm using your words now, what you said is, we supply machines. We do not run elections. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Those were your words, and the tabulator does the count for the votes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that can be checked by counting, hand counting the paper ballots. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the software that you claim and the supplying of the machines, and this is very technical, and I need to get this so that we can clear up any ambiguity. Did you train individuals on what they're supposed to do when you put these machines or the software in service?
I was not involved, but that's typically what we do. We train county officials on how to use software.
Is there a manual that somebody who has, like, let's say, authority over the individuals that are working for them in the in the clerk's office can reference when there's a need to see how the training goes? To the best of my knowledge, all of our manuals and user guides were submitted to the state on the original state contract and part of that process, and distributed from the state to the counties. And I know that in many situations, the counties will generate their own user guides and manuals based on our materials. So that I'm clear, when you enter into an agreement with the state of Michigan to supply your equipment, your machines, and your software, there has to be some kind of way to make sure that they're running the machinery correctly and the software correctly. Would that be fair?
That's correct.
All right. Do you charge a fee in the contract? And I don't really want to know how much you know, it's none of my business, but do you charge a fee for that training?
If there was a fee, it would have been part of the original upfront purchase.
How long ago? I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't give you a chance to finish.
No, and on a county by county basis, counties are free
to make their own determinations. Sometimes they get supplemental training either from state officials. Sometimes they get supplemental training as the need presents itself to the counties. That's not really something I'm expert on.
I understand, and I only want to limit your testimony to what you know. If you don't know, I'd like you to, and Mr. Chairman, through the chair, I would like you to give us at least to have your lawyer who's there present with you today, write down what it is that we're looking for so that we can supplement your testimony and get the information from your office. Is that a problem?
Oh, of course.
Thank you. So, because what I'm looking at is I buy something, I want to know how to use it properly so that I don't have it malfunction and or misfire or whatever the case may be. And I'm not real familiar with a tabulator nor the software that runs the same. But if these machines that are supplied to the counties to go ahead and make, or to the communities that are doing these tabulations of the votes, that software is unique to that machine. It's proprietary, right?
The software that resides on our tabulators is proprietary,
Yeah,
and that is once we certify at the federal level, that's when we lose control of the software. It is transmitted from the independent certification agencies to the counties, and then it transfers into the county's chain of custody.
Is the memory cards that you put into the machinery, is that locked down that the memory card can't be manipulated and or distorted?
Right. So
if I wanted to get the memory card out of the machine, would that if we had to remove a memory card from the machine, could that be possible?
Sure. You'd have to break the seal during the election. I'm assuming you're asking during the election.
During the election, correct.
Yeah. So as I stated, when the machines are delivered to a polling location, the compartments by which the memory cards are inserted into the machine are both locked and sealed. We actually have 3 memory cards, and one of them is designed to be removed at the end of election day. So there is a definitive audit on the source code of the machine, or sorry, not the source code, but part of the log on the tabulator when the tabulator door is open and when the cards are removed. And it is designed that it does not come out of the machine until the polls are closed. The seal is broken by the local poll workers, and the locks are unlocked.
So that we got a correct record, there's 3 memory cards. One is designed to be removed. The other 2, I'm assuming, based on what you're saying, but I don't want to assume anything, are not to be removed.
So one of them is designed not to be removed, and that is internal. And 2 of them are removable, and one of them is designed not to be removed, just in case somebody makes any allegation on the card that was removed, even though it's securely transferred by the local election workers, oftentimes accompanied by a sheriff. There's even, and by the way, they're encrypted and signed. But even on the allegation, you could compare it to the second memory card that is a redundant copy that is designed to be continue to be locked and sealed in the tabulator.
If I tell you that somebody removed a memory card where they shouldn't have, would you have backup software or alarm systems that would go off to report that type of behavior in your proprietary machine and software?
So if an allegation was made that one of the memory cards was removed, and let's just, for the sake of your example, say that none of the poll officials noticed it, or the bipartisan poll watchers noticed it, or any voter noticed it, there would be a record of it. And we also have the other card that's in the machine, and they would be off, and the machine will not let you continue if one of them has been removed.
Do you have any validation or way to validate whether a memory card was removed from these machines? Have you started your validation? I know that there was 3. I was reading some stuff, and it says that you do something before the election process, either your company or the clerk, during the election process, there's something done regarding, and then after the election process. Have you guys started, your company started to do an after-election audit as to what happened and look into what these allegations, because you so eloquently gave your testimony, and I appreciate that, trying to clear up any inconsistencies or ambiguity. Tell me, have you started now at this point, and have you completed your after the election process?
Right. So I will point back to what I mentioned in my opening statement. We do not run elections. We are not accountable for running elections. And as such, we do not run the test before the election, or we do not run the test after election. So every state has its own local rules. And quite often there will be a public logic and accuracy test done before the election. Many jurisdictions will repeat that test after canvass is completed, and they will do a logic and accuracy test post-election. And then some jurisdictions take it a step further and do exactly what you are talking about, but they don't contract with us to do it. The whole idea is that we shouldn't be the ones doing it. The federal system that was put in place after the 2000 presidential election, with the creation of the EAC as a bipartisan commission that does their own accreditation of separate third-party labs that are accredited. The whole purpose of that is that no voter or stakeholder has to blindly trust any technology provider. So the test that you are asking is part of the local officials process and best done by an EAC accredited lab. I will say we have several customers, especially in light of the baseless allegations that have been levied our way in the recent weeks, that have contracted a variety of these EAC accredited independent test labs to do exactly as you say. And their checks are, there's various number of checks that they perform. And I'm certainly no expert at what they do, but the way I think of it is they are verifying that the software that was run in the election was unchanged, that it is in fact the same certified software. They can run a variety of forensic tools to ensure that what you're describing, if it did happen, they would know it happened. And they do that all independent of us.
How do I know as a voter, Mr. Polis, that I didn't have any irregularity of the software being manipulated? How can I be sure of that?
Right, it's a great question. So the fact that somebody has made an allegation is cause enough, in my opinion, to do a hand count audit and recount. And that has been requested in a number of our jurisdictions. And at the end of the day, you have to remember that the ballot box was secure and empty at the beginning of the day. And at the end of the day, there was a number of ballots that each voter deposited into that sealed and locked ballot box. Those voters and their eligibility were verified by the local poll workers under the watch of the local poll workers and bipartisan poll watchers. And those ballots haven't gone anywhere. They've been under secure control of the poll workers. So even the allegation in an environment of like we're seeing right now, which is unprecedented, it's, in my opinion, it's exactly why the Michigan Secretary of State's office is working with Antrim County to perform that hand count.
Did you provide any training films? And I know that you said training manuals, booklets, I think you call them. Any training films that would physically give a video to or a link to a training film so that the individuals would learn properly how to utilize your machine and your software?
Sir, we provide a variety of training tools. I'm the original contract in the state of Michigan, I believe was in 2017. We regularly rely on a host of different training techniques and design it in collaboration with the end customer, be it the county or state.
So that would have been with Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. That would have been the one you would have contracted with? She was the Secretary of State in
I'll have to get back.
2017.
I don't recall who we
I think it's
specifically contracted with.
2017, is that, was she?
No, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Vice Chair, but Jocelyn Benson's term began in 19.
19?
Yes.
Okay, 2019, the chair cleared it up. Could you tell me about the process, though, because you're still acting as a CEO, even though you just indicated, I think in your testimony, the majority of the company was sold?
Yes, in 2018.
Okay. And this was your company that you, from birth, basically. I'm going to say that you're the one that, did you design the software?
Not my birth, Senator. Company's birth.
Oh, could you tell me, did you design the software that went for this? Do you have, was it you or was it somebody else that designed the software, how to manipulate meaning the vote count and tally to make sure that there was consistency and to make sure that there was credibility?
Well, let me just be clear. We don't manipulate anything. All our software does is takes it. If you look at a tabulator from your home county, actually, I'm not sure if you're using Dominion in Antrim County, let's say. Our tabulator software looks at the paper ballot, and we integrate the number of black pixels in the oval corresponding to a candidate's name. And that is designed in a way that the machine is interpreting voter intent the same way that a human being would. And so it's designed to be very objective. There's no manipulation of any kind. And yes, I do have knowledge of the source code that developed that.
The warranty, and I use the word warranty, I don't know another word, maybe you can help me, about post-elections to ensure the security and the trust of the election. Is there some kind of warranty that goes with that for the state when they purchase this unit and software? That it's going to act in a manner consistent with your statements as well as how you have the intended use of the unit?
We'll have to get back to you upon looking at the state contract.
If somebody didn't properly download software, would that change a result? And I'm going to every single item I can think of to see how these allegations, how these affidavits that we've taken from so many people across the state, I want to validate what they saw, what they looked at, what they heard, as opposed to what really happened. So if you weren't there, and I think there was representatives of Dominion at like the TCF Center, was there not? Is that standard and a customary in the industry of your machinery being placed into service to have people from Dominion there the night of the election?
Senator, you mentioned a few things. First of all, in terms of the affidavits and any pertaining to the accuracy of the tabulation, I am not aware of any that have been found to be credible, certainly none that I've seen, and I don't know of any judge that have found any of those allegations credible. With specific regards to whether or not it's normal to have on-site technical support from the tabulation companies, it depends. It's at the sole discretion of the county. And in the case of the TCF Center, we did have on-site technical support there. They are not part of running the election, and they are expressly there to answer any questions from the election officials whose job it is to run the election.
Was there a separate contract that was with consideration that was utilized as a result of coming to that election at TCF here in the state of Michigan?
I'm not aware of it off the top of my head. That's something we can get back to you on.
Is it, like I said, not normal? Is it customary? Let's use that word, not normal. Was there any other counties in the state other than Wayne that had assistance through Dominion being there? Meaning, do you recall, based on Michigan has been spotlighted and shown throughout the country, do you recall of any other county of the 83 counties in the state?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. So the only one that you do recall is that there was support staff there from Dominion, correct?
In Wayne County, correct.
And the only,
I think so. As I said, I don't know, Senator, but that sounds right.
do you recall how many people that came from Dominion to assist in answering questions from election officials in Wayne County?
No, I don't.
Do you know what, I mean, is this customarily done? Have you seen this in your 18 years, I think, where
Yes.
people go, they do, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, Georgia or Texas?
Sorry, one at a time. Georgia, yes. Pennsylvania, yes. Wisconsin, I don't know. Texas, I don't know. What was it? Did you mention another one?
Michigan, but you gave us an answer.
Oh, right.
Okay. And right now, is there a written report that was received from the individuals that were at the TCF Center on behalf of Dominion and working on behest of Wayne County?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did they report back to anybody in the company to give information as to what these allegations were and what
Yeah, I don't know.
So, in conclusion, somewhat, how do you validate what has been tabulated if there's no system in place that you can run, or if there's no software that validates it other than hand count? Is there any other way to avoid a hand count from the software and the hardware that you put in service to validate this is the vote? This is true, accurate representation of the vote.
Well, first off, there is a very well-documented system, and it starts at the EAC level long before any system is sold, with third-party testing and accreditation. In this testing center, these independent labs that are trained on election process, they go through every single line of source code, line by line. They test every facet of every feature of the machine under a lot of different permutations and combinations of elections. In addition to that, before that system it can be sold, for example, in the state of Michigan, it gets certified after the federal certification once again by the state authorities in Michigan. So to say that there's not a there's a very well-documented system that is extremely accurate.
I appreciate
the accuracy.
Wait a minute. I guess I'm asking something else. Even though they have, like they do like automobiles, they go through a check test. Like they check everything, check the boxes. But if we want like access control, only authorized individuals are running the machine. And I understand what you said. We don't run elections. Encrypted end to end so that no one can manipulate the data. And endpoints that hold the data, that those endpoints weren't breached. Could you be specific on what systems do you have on your software that can ensure that access control, encryption end to end, and endpoints that hold the data were not breached?
Fair question. So as part of the federal certification guidelines, there is very well and rigorously documented security requirements of the media where votes are recorded and translated. I think to your question in terms of a check after a car rolls off the assembly line. So our source code remains unchanged, and that is exactly what post-election activities should verify after every election. They check that the hash code is exactly the same as the certification hash code, and that gives the local officials the knowledge that the source code was exactly the source code that was certified and tested. The check of the actual election, because the programming, and this is not in the source code of the system, but this is now how you program an election because the candidates change. The contests change from election to election. This is what's done at every election. This is what the logic inaccuracy testing done in a public forum allows you to verify that it's correct and complete.
The ranked choice voting, is it the clerk that flips it or Dominion when they do the ranked choice voting?
There's no flipping of any votes at any time on any system. Ranked choice voting is something completely different that was not used in Michigan.
Okay. Then the last one then is the post-election activity should be verified. That was your statement. What post-election activity should be verified in our state?
My personal recommendation,
Yes, sir.
and which I've seen work in other states, is an authorized independent test authority accredited by the EAC should be doing exactly what you are looking for and verifying that the system was exactly used in a certified manner.
Did you make that recommendation to anyone here in the state at this time?
The state is the one that came up with it in the first place years ago. And I think that they've used it. I'd have to double check on the first time it was used, but it's not, this is a common practice.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll probably have some follow-up after I know that the other senators have questions.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Lucido. And I just want to have a quick follow-up to one of the Vice Chair's questions, and then we'll take a little break, if that's all right with you, Mr. Polis.
Of course.
The Vice Chair was just mentioning the ranked voting, and you
ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting, and you've mentioned a couple of times in your opening and now that that's not an option that Antrim County had, but it is part of your programming, right? It is something that the software itself offers as an option that's used in some place.
Ranked choice voting is a requirement in some jurisdictions. It was not used anywhere in Michigan, and this is something that an independent test authority can easily verify, as can any election official. You need look no further than just the paper ballots, but there is a whole audit that an independent test authority can use to look and answer that definitively.
Is it possible for that option to be simply turned on accidentally even, or intentionally, but even accidentally? No. Is it possible that Antrim could turn that on?
No, the answer is no. And even if they could do that, which they can't, it would not go undetected. And as I said, an independent test authority accredited by the EAC could easily determine that for you.
Could you, and I don't want to do a lot of these all day where we get into the real technical weeds, but on this one, could you share with us why you believe that's impossible? What are the technical specifications that make that impossible for it to accidentally be turned on?
Well, you don't need to look any further than the actual paper ballot. So if you knew what a ranked choice voting ballot looked like, you could see that there's different columns for each candidate where voters can select their first preference and then their second and third and so on. As I said, it's not certified for use in Michigan. It's not allowed for use in Michigan. It's not something that election officials can just turn on. And even if they could, it's easily detectable.
Okay. At this point then, members, I'd like us to take a 10-minute recess and we'll come back. Mr. Polis, thank you. You have 10 minutes.
Great. Thank you.
It's not just that we're out here voicing our opinions for us. We're out here voicing our opinions for all Americans, because Americans deserve a free and fair election.
Over. And those people that are telling you right now that it is over are lying to you.
We're not guided by your governor. We're not guided by your Secretary of State. We're not guided by Joe Biden. We're not guided by the New York Times. And we're not guided by all those stations that call the election. You know what we're guided by? The Constitution of the United States.
We just reached
find out from you is the functional inhibitions in the software. You say that it's not, that they can't access it, but what does that mean? I mean, do they see a button on the screen, but it's grayed out, so it doesn't work? What would it take to turn it on? I mean, is that something you guys turn on when you sell the software to Michigan? How is that, how is it inhibited from being accidentally or purposefully turned on?
Well, that's correct, Senator. So it is not installed. When the election officials took possession of their system, whenever that was, back in 2017-18, they would have had to separately install a module that would be part of the record that, again, as I've said, any independent testing authority could verify this, so you don't necessarily have to take my word or even a poll official's word for it. One of the claims that I think I've seen that may be related to this is the allegation of fractions in our reporting software. As I said in my opening statement, there is no fractional voting. That's just not a feature of our system. And any audit of our database would show this. We don't allocate fractions and certainly don't do any switching or deletion of these votes.
So when the ranked voting occurs in the states that do allow that, is there a fractional vote count that comes out in those situations, or is it still whole numbers?
No, so the report that I happened to see in, it was, I think, another hearing in your state, and it was attributed to our system. I can tell you that's false, and I haven't seen any report of where that report came from. It looked like it was just created on PowerPoint. I can tell you that it does not come from any report on our system. And that's something any one of your counties that use our system could verify for you. In the states that do use ranked choice voting, it is a separately installed module with separate training. And the telltale sign of whether or not it's on is you look at the ballots. So beside Senator McBroom's name on a ballot, there might be, if it's a vote for 5, there might be 4 different columns. So I could vote for you as my first choice or my second choice, third or fourth choice. The rules on this vary in the jurisdictions that use them. But again, it is not allowed for use in Michigan. It has nothing to do with Michigan. It wasn't used for Michigan. And that's something that can be easily and independently verified.
So on with the fractional voting issue, since you bring this up, and I would have, if one of the other committee members hadn't, I've seen a page that appears to be a screenshot that demonstrates fractional votes. And at the bottom of it, it says Dominion software. Is there any screen in your software that would allow that to happen? And if not, then where did this come from?
Absolutely not. It does not come from our software. Our reports typically don't have from Dominion software on the bottom of our reports. Our reports can be obtained through the Secretary of State's office or counties that use our systems. And as to the all-important question of where that screenshot came from, to me, it looked like it was an actual PowerPoint report. Your guess is as good as mine. All I can tell you is it did not come from our system.
I'm going to go back slightly, and it's not that I won't come back to fractional voting, but I'm going to mull over what you said, and perhaps we'll come back from a different angle. But you were mentioning how in the post-election, your software, the machinery is audited by the EAC or potentially by a third party, correct?
Yeah, the federal process specifically requires it to be thoroughly tested, including source code review, accuracy test, volume test, environmental test. It's very comprehensive. The manual is thousands of pages of long, the requirements.
Why doesn't Dominion do some of its own auditing of the systems at the completion of the election afterwards? I mean, do you come to any of the counties, take back machinery or software and reevaluate how it performed yourself?
That's a great question, Senator. The whole system is designed so that no voter needs to blindly trust any individual company, doesn't need to blindly trust any individual technology or any individual poll worker. So the role of auditing and testing prior and after the system is best not done by the company that provides the actual technology in the first place. It is best done by the election officials whose accountability is to run the elections under their total control, and best done by independently accredited experts from a bipartisan federal committee that reviews everything from competence on the technical and the procedural side as it pertains to elections. And so that's why we don't audit our own software. Now, to the question of do we test our software? Absolutely, we test our software very, very thoroughly, but that happens completely independent of any customer jurisdiction or the certification lab. This is generally something that we do very extensively prior to submission to the federal government for federal certification.
How would your company know then if there were issues with the interface ability, with customer satisfaction in regards to the performance of the software? What do you do to receive feedback on how well the program works and how well it interfaces?
Well, it's an iterative exercise through continued conversations, collaborative in nature with our customers that use our software and systems.
And now turning my attention, and I'm sorry to kind of bounce around here a little bit on you.
No worries.
When we look at the Antrim report that's recently come out, there's specifically notes regarding the absence of logging within the steps of the adjudicated ballots. You went through for us what the adjudicated ballot is and what that entails, but you mentioned there's both an automated and a non-automated system for adjudication. Which one is it that Antrim County had, and where are these logs that the report that came yesterday says are missing?
There's no automated process for adjudication. The two different systems are one that is manual in nature, that requires local bipartisan adjudication committees to remake new paper ballots based on mistakes that they agree on that a voter who is voting absentee have made. And the second is the same process, but instead of remaking a paper ballot, they make their selection and their determination electronically that is attached to the original image. And so Antrim County used the manual process. They do not license the digital adjudication software. And we know for a fact that they could not have used it because they did not record absentee ballot images, which is a prerequisite to use a digital adjudication.
So in my township, and I'm part of a small township, and by the way, just for the record, because I'll get in trouble later if I don't correct you, Antrim County is downstate, not in the UP. It's close to the UP, but it's downstate.
Fair enough. As you might have surmised, Senator, I have not been to Antrim County. It's on my to-do list to visit Antrim County.
It's a beautiful place. I hope you'll get the chance. Regardless, so in my precinct, I don't see any computers there at all. I mean, there's one tabulator. And so does that mean then that if they need to do adjudication of ballots there for an absentee ballot, they're going to have a manual process then, correct?
That's correct.
If a place has a digital process, they would have to have a computer there that interfaced with the tabulator?
That's correct.
Okay. And so are those networked? Is the computer then networked directly to the tabulator on a local area network?
The systems are designed to be closed networked, which means they are connected to each other in a local area network, but they are not designed to be connected to the outside world through either an internet connection or any other external connectivity device.
Is there something, though, that would prohibit that from occurring?
I'm sorry, is there something that would prohibit connectivity to occur? Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, if the locals were to have that computer connected to the World Wide Web and also networked to the tabulator, is there something in the software that would shut things down at that point? Would it continue to operate? What is the security protocol at that point?
Well, first and foremost, the physical security that is under and there's no adjudication that ever happens at a polling place. One of the audits that an independent test authority accredited by the EAC can perform is a test to look at whether or not that computer was connected to the internet, which of course it's designed not to.
I thought that you might have just said that adjudication doesn't take place at the polling place, but I'm not sure. Is that what you meant to say? Because
Yes.
I mean, isn't that where, if there's a ballot with an overvote, isn't that adjudication going to take place there at the polling place?
Okay, fair enough. So I did say that. So let's take a couple steps back to make sure we're on the same page.
Please.
In a county like Antrim or your county, where they are using a manual adjudication process, adjudication does not happen at the polling location. Adjudication happens only as it pertains to absentee ballots that are received at whatever location that county may be processing the absentee ballots that come in. So the county runs their independent process in verifying the absentee ballots that come in, verifying voter eligibility per whatever rules they have, and then the ballots are then processed, usually, and to my knowledge, exclusively at a centralized location that is physically controlled by, in every respect, by the local election officials. So in a county such as Antrim, the adjudication would have been done by hand. Any paper ballots that needed to be adjudicated would have been done by taking a problem ballot, if there was agreement by the adjudication board, and taking a brand new blank ballot and making the marks that the panel agreed to. They would put the actual ballot somewhere else for keeping, and then the ballot that they made would be the one that would be scanned. In the case of Antrim, and I strongly suspect your home county as well, that scanning would have happened through a polling place tabulator, but not at a polling place. So in the case of Antrim, what I just learned the other day was out of the 18 tabulators that they had, 2 of them, I believe, were dedicated for absentee ballot scanning through a counting board.
Okay. So,
and I will add, in this scenario, there is no connectivity of any kind. We were mixing digital adjudication when you're doing digital adjudication, but in the scenario that we are talking about now, as it pertains to your county or Antrim County, there is no internet connectivity at all.
okay, thank you. But it does open up kind of the can for the other, major thing that we've talked about, where obviously in TCF, they were using digital adjudication.
Well, let's come back to that in a second. I just want to clarify one thing. So the reason why we don't need adjudication for in-person voting, that is if a voter made the same mistake in a local precinct where they are in person, the voter has the tabulator will prompt the voter about their error and offer the voter a second chance to correct their ballot. So in a hand marked paper ballot scenario, if the voter selects your name and then crosses or fills in the oval beside your name, and then crosses it out and fills in an oval below your name in the same contest, and it was only a vote for one contest, they're the ones that in-person voting, the voter themselves is feeding their ballot in the tabulator, and the tabulator will prompt them of their mistake, so they have a chance to correct it themselves. You don't need an adjudication panel because the voter can correct it for themselves. The issue arises in absentee voting, where the ballot has been now separated from the voter because it has been sent through the mail. And we are without the adjudication process, you're not giving that voter the same chance. So it's obviously different, but the states that allow it have very strict rules and offer guidance to the bipartisan adjudication panels of what they are and aren't allowed to do per state and local law.
Thank you. In the situations where they choose to use digital adjudication, such as at TCF or other mostly larger counties, and a computer then is local area network connected to the tabulator, what is you answered earlier, it's up to the locals to provide the security, but if they were to allow that computer to be connected to outside networks, does that present a vulnerability to the tabulator's programming?
Well, the system, as I said, is designed not to be connected. So if they're running certified software on those systems that are not connected to the internet, the record of what the adjudication panel is doing gets appended to the original ballot image, and they are available for audit. So these are questions best answered by the election officials that work to secure that location, because you can imagine conceptually that's just as dangerous as not having control of your in-person voting precinct. Back to the example of your home county, if you didn't trust the poll worker and you didn't trust all of the bipartisan watchers, that speaks to the security of the overall process, not to the accuracy of the tabulators. As I've said in my opening statement, the true test of a tabulation system such as ours is in the manual recount and an audit that is taking place. And that is something that is always available to do.
And I guess what I'm trying to come back to, because I started off with this question about logging of security. And so would outside manipulation, if somebody had these things connected, and obviously that's not the case in Antrim County, but potentially, possibly the case in other counties, would those security logs represent if somebody were to attempt some manipulation?
Well, certainly not. I don't think so. That's really a question for election investigators. I'm not aware of anything that has been found to be credible. But as I said, this really is a question for the officials that control the physical custody of the ballots. Our machines are responsible for the accuracy in regards to counting the paper ballots, and that's exactly what they do.
In the Antrim, back to Antrim, and I know we're bouncing around. In Antrim County, the report says that there is a period of time where there isn't any security logs. What is the explanation for that?
So, Senator, I've only had a cursory review of what I consider the biased and report that came up. I've also had a chance to cursory review, I should say, of the Secretary of State's response, which I frankly agree with the response that was issued recently to that report. As I've mentioned earlier, Dominion did not program Antrim County. We have no access to their systems. We are still not in possession of any of the logs or any of the databases or any of the election material from Antrim County. And so, as I said, a lot of the arguments were incomprehensible to me, but then again, I haven't seen any of the files, so I can't comment on what it is they're looking for, other than I know some of the conclusions were wrong and false.
Okay. Senator Tice has some questions.
Hello there. Thank you for being with us today. I very much appreciate that.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So there's a lot of confusion. I want to start with Antrim. I know we've been over it, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but because there's so much confusion, I want to clarify it for people who haven't been there and for who don't understand what the process was that happened. So when a clerk is getting ready to do an election, she's bringing in all of the information for all of the things that are going to go on the ballot. And there's a lot of things, and it's unique all the way down to the precinct, because we have precinct delegates. So it goes all the way down to that level. And so it's very, very specific. And so they get all of that information, and then they lock the election. And that's when the ballots can start to get printed and all the testing can be done. And at the point that it was locked, there was a realization, and you spoke to this, correct? That there was a candidate that they found that was left off. You said it was a school board member. I thought that she had testified that it was a township, or no, a village trustee, but not sure which it was. Anyway, it was. Could
very well be correct. I'm not sure on exactly what was. All I know is the programming changed on.
Correct.
On ballots that affected 3 precincts.
And I thought maybe there was something else like a millage or something else too, but nonetheless, it would have changed the format of the ballot once they were reprinted. It would have looked different even. There would have been additional information on the ballot that hadn't existed there previously. So for that particular precinct, it looked different. Would that have affected outside areas beyond that precinct such that all of it needed to be reprogrammed? My understanding was it did. Is that true? Okay. So the entire county needed to be reprogrammed for the tabulators, not just the one precinct. Is that correct?
Sure. Well, I'll try to answer it this way. You're correct when you say that the election was locked. My understanding is that was sometime in September. And the ballots had PDFs generated for final sign-off by county officials. And once that sign-off occurred, ballots were printed. And I believe the ballots were then in custody of the county. Mm-hmm. Whatever the change is, whether it was a candidate or an addition of a contest, to the best of my understanding, the change, as it would be noticed by a voter, and I'll say it as simply as I can. The voting information, meaning the contests and the candidates in each contest, were only different after the change in ballots that affected 3 precincts, which corresponded to 3 tabulators. The issue on how the people that were programming the election, as I understand it, because it wasn't our company, but I have a good understanding of this, and it's going to be apparent why they did it this way. They updated the election project to correctly identify what the extra candidate, the extra contest, whatever it was. But care was taken to make the ballots that were printed and in possession of the county for the other 15 tabulators, care was taken to make them exactly the same. And the way there's a good reason for that. This feature exists because a lot of jurisdictions have the requirement where there might be a last minute court order to remove a candidate or to add a candidate, and it's simply impossible to reprogram thousands of machines overnight from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. So this is why the feature exists. In this case, it was deployed to save the ballot printing of what was already in possession. So that, again, best of my understanding, they only really had to destroy ballots, the blank ballots that were set to go for 3 tabulators, and they only reprinted the ballots associated with the change. Now, where the error happened was as I said, there was 2 different human errors that were compounded by the way that it was programmed. So the first error, there was instructions given, as I understand it, to reburn all 18 memory cards for each of the tabulators. I don't think this happened. So that was the first mistake.
She testified that it did not.
Right. The second, it's clear that I'm assuming, I shouldn't say it's clear. I'm making the assumption that a public logic and accuracy test was not performed at that point, because had it had been, the change would have been noticed, or the error would have been noticed. So specifically, to the best of my knowledge, of the 18 machines, some were running September project and some are running October project, and some of the ballots were September ballots and some of them were October ballots. So a couple things. Normally, if programmed in a usual way, the September memory cards would not have been allowed to be uploaded into our results and tally application. And this is the part of the application after the memory cards get securely transmitted, often with a sheriff, back to the central location, and those cards are uploaded, and the results are compared to the actual printout from the tabulators. So normally the September cards would not have even been allowed to be uploaded, but because the care was taken to make this allowable, they were. And so all 18 cards were able to be uploaded into the results and tally module. And that's where there was an error in the unofficial report. So as I mentioned, that's a very big reason why we do canvass, or why election officials do canvass, because that's where this was noticed, identified, and corrected long before results were made official.
So you've testified to all of this, but what you're doing is getting into the excruciating detail and making it extremely difficult to see the bigger picture for the people who are not accustomed to the detail of the tabulators. What I'm trying to do is to provide a picture for what this looks like from the voter's perspective and then from the outcome perspective. So without the proper programming and without the proper ballot, if I go in and feed that into the tabulator and the ballot that goes in is not the ballot that it expects to receive based on programming, then I'm going to have an outcome that is not an accurate outcome because the ballot isn't the accurate ballot that it's supposed to have, right? So we've added a contest. We've shifted stuff around. We're using September instead of October. There's something different with respect to it than it is expecting to receive. This isn't a Dominion thing. This is a programming thing. And so I'm trying to wrap my brain around what that would look like on the outcome perspective and how that would affect the numbers, because I'm feeding in one thing and it's trying to tabulate on something completely different. And I know that your system wouldn't allow this, but if I were to take something from Precinct 8, walk it over to Precinct 6 and feed it in, stuff wouldn't be in the right place. It wouldn't have the right questions on the ballot. And so as it tried to tabulate it, it would attribute the wrong numbers to the wrong things, assuming it would take it, of course. And then I'd have the wrong numbers in the wrong place. It seems to me, in my non-election brain, that that's similar to what happened here. If you step out of the detail and you look at the frame, you look at the outcome, is that...
I think I understand, and I apologize for getting into the weeds. I'm accused of that quite often, actually. But if you look at it from a 30,000-foot level, from the best of my understanding, we have some tabulators that were programmed for September that were fed September ballots. And we have some tabulators that were programmed for October with October ballots. As long as the October ballots were read by the October memory cards and the September cards were reading September ballots, the result taped from the tabulator would be correct. And I believe this is exactly what happened. To the extent that there was one location and one tabulator that was using a September memory card with October ballots, and it had this extra person or contest, that is, there wouldn't be any changes to the top of the ballot contests, but there very well may be a change to the affected race. And to my knowledge, that's precisely why the Secretary of State's office, together with Antrim County officials, are working to do a 100% audit on the presidential race to confirm that the results on the tape actually match 100% the results of the paper ballots, which of course had been securely stored under the custody of the local election officials.
So that is not my understanding of how that whole process worked, and it doesn't, the numbers that we saw should not have been affected at the top of the ticket for stuff that was going on at the bottom of the ticket. Now, what I had in my head for how that happened is you've just completely come back with something different than what I expected to hear. So can you explain to me how the top of the ticket numbers would have been affected by bottom of the ticket changes with what you just told me?
Okay. So we have two sets of results. We have the result tapes that are printed at the end of the election at polls close. And that is a thermal tape that has the results in the tally and the number of ballots that correspond to the number of ballots in the ballot box. Mm-hmm. We're good on that. So we call those tabulator results from the printout. Then we have the centralized computer that is designed to amalgamate and tally the results from all of the 18 tabulators together in a way that it can be reported easily from the county to, let's say, the Secretary of State's office or the media. So what I just said is in particular regards to the tabulator results. This is the printout that happened. There was multiple printouts at the close of poll at the end of election day. One was posted publicly in whatever building each tabulator was in. Multiple copies would have been handed out, and we have those results. And as long as September ballots were fed into machines that had memory cards programmed from the September project, those results will be 100% accurate. And as long as the tabulators that featured the cards from the October programming had October ballots fed through them, those tapes would be 100% accurate. When those cards then got driven in to the central location and they were inserted into a desktop computer, our tally server that the county has in their sole possession and control, the September cards should not have even been allowed to download the results if it was programmed in a regular way. The only way, and this is what confounded the two human error issues, because the programming was allowed to accept on the back end, on the tally computer, that tally computer was instructed to read cards from the September project and the October project. And that is where the reporting error from the night of the election through to the next morning at some point, that is where the results were very off, because that database was expecting structures in different ways than they actually were given on those memory cards. And that is what confounded the problem. So the results were never validated, they were never certified. And that is exactly the process of Canvas and why they were caught the day after. Does that help in the explanation? Or
that does. So the tabulators provided that they were accurately programmed for the particular ballots that were being fed into them, regardless of whether they were September or October, are fine. It's not until the point of time that we're bringing together all of the information from all of the separate tabulators into an individual where we're conglomerating all of the information. It's not until that point in time where we're mixing then the October and September election plans, you call them projects, where it becomes an issue. And that at some point there was an override from where September was forced in, as well as the October, that should not have been allowed. And that's what created the problem. Okay, thank you. That does help.
And I will add that we are confident that the top of the ticket, so the presidential race, was not affected on the tabulator results, the tapes from the 18 tabulators. But of course, this is going to be, the recount will be the ultimate judge of that.
So yes, thank you. That's good. I just wanted to clarify a few things. So EAC is something that we've been referencing a lot. That's the Election Assistance Commission. A lot of people would have no idea what that is.
Correct.
When you are talking about whether or not the clerk would choose to download different aspects of the software that's available, like ranked choice. I know we've been beating the dead horse, but let me keep going here for a second. I don't have a ton of confidence based on the history that's been happening that all of the correct software choices were made, and perhaps some inappropriate software downloads happened. Is that possible, or do you not even think that that's possible?
No, I don't think that's possible.
Okay.
This is not some feature that can be accidentally turned on. It is a distinct module that starts with the election definition, and that leads to the way the ballot looks. So this is not some feature that can accidentally be turned on.
Okay. So that also helps me with some of the issues that I was wondering, because I was thinking that when the clerk realized her issue and there was no longer anybody there, would she have manually had to adjudicate the ballots because everybody had already left? But you're saying no, they could have gone, in fact, just with the tabulator tapes and counted them that way, but now they're going back and doing a manual to compare the tabulator tapes and the numbers to the manual ballots.
You've confused me on that one. Are we specifically talking about Antrim County?
Yes, just Antrim right now.
So again, any adjudication would have happened only on the absentee ballots that were mailed in.
Well,
So
It was my perspective that because this election had happened and then she realized her error after that, when these ballots had already been fed in, that something else would have had to happen, but you corrected me on that, so thank you.
Yeah, again, Antrim County did not and could not have used digital adjudication.
Got it.
And the manual adjudication would have been done prior to her closing the polls on the two tabulators that ultimately printed out a results tape.
Okay, thank you. And I want to shift a little bit. I want to clarify something. You keep talking about the bipartisan watchers for things that are ongoing. They're not always available in all areas, in all places. And in some places, they're easier to find than others. And so part of the issues that we're dealing with as an oversight committee is they weren't always available in order to make sure that everything was done in the forthright manner that you describe. And that's not your problem, but that is, it doesn't always happen that way. And we want to make sure that it does. Do you, so you have equipment that are that's the tabulators. Do you guys also provide the high-speed tabulators?
Yes, we do.
All right. They don't have, do they have a box that the ballots go into also, or are they accessible to you at both the beginning and the end of the scan?
Well, they're never accessible to Dominion staff.
I'm sorry, to the person handling them.
Right. They're accessible. They're always accessible. So any high-speed scanner, the way it works to get a high throughput speed, usually has a U-shape scan head to minimize the frequency of jams, especially with ballots that have been folded and passed through the mail twice and handled by a number of different individuals. So the ballots, there is an incoming tray and an outgoing tray.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. I may have some further questions later. Let's see. I did want to ask if we could get from you, because you referenced the contracts and you're not sure what we have contracts with. I don't want the details of your contracts. That's between you and whomever you contract with. But I would like to know with whom you have contracts for our state. So I know you do with the state of Michigan, obviously Antrim County, but if we could get that information, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I don't think we have a contract with Antrim County, but we will certainly get that for you, Senator.
It could be their counties are contracting with the state in order to have access to that too. That's possible. And then you said the on-site technical support is part of the contract generally when it happens.
I wouldn't say generally. It's definitely not out of the norm. It's just in a lot of places, it's a regular part of our process.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and patience with me. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tice. Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Chair McBroom. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go back to some of the technical questions, if you don't mind. Can you tell us what programming language is used and if it includes any database system?
Not off the top of my head, but that's something certainly I can get for you.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Can you walk us through the business logic of what happens when a ballot is processed? For example, if a database record is created or they are simply updating a counter?
In the case of our polling, our precinct tabulator, every time a ballot is fed through the machine, there's a number of checks that the software goes through to identify the ballot being a legitimate ballot and a ballot from this election. And then it goes through the processing of the ballot, and then everything, of course, is logged and saved.
So to your knowledge, is it possible for somebody to change a record value either locally or remotely?
No, to my knowledge, it's not. And even if it were, there certainly wouldn't be able to do it undetected.
So it wouldn't leave like a log entry if it was possible? Would it leave any trail?
It would leave a trail. There would be a mismatch from the other card. And there's several checks and balances in the machine that can identify whether or not such a thing happened, which of course I don't think it can.
Okay, thank you. And this has become a big issue. Do you have any knowledge about the SolarWinds breach? Are you familiar with
Very
this at all?
limited.
Because
All I know is that we don't use the SolarWinds Orion package that was the subject of the DHS report from the 13th, I guess, yesterday.
Is it possible for somebody to insert a USB drive that could have manipulated the database or data or software? Is that possible to your knowledge?
In our tabulators? No, I don't think it's possible. And again, even at the central computer, even if it was, it would be detected.
I just have two more questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Small towns in Wayne County adjudicated in Detroit or at the local precinct? And if so, how was the data transferred?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Last question. How do you electronically match voter to identity so the voter can vote, so we can catch it so they can't vote more than once?
Well, that's really a question
that
for
a
the
clerk
officials.
issue?
It's really a question for the election officials whose job it is to verify eligibility. It's not something we do.
Okay, yeah, I just thought I'd check that. Okay. I may have more questions, but for now, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Polis, I'm going to go back to a question that I've hit from a couple of different angles before, but I just want to be really clear that we're talking on the same wavelength here. If, whether it's at TCF or a facility that uses digital adjudication, where they have a tabulator connected in a closed network to a computer, if by accident or intent that computer is not secured properly and is also connected to a network, a wider network, is it possible for someone to maliciously and unknowing, without us knowing it, hack into the tabulator and alter the results?
No, I don't think that's possible. But again, even if it were, it would be detectable.
Can you share with us how it would be detectable? What are the assurances that we can have to that?
Well, what I would recommend would be an independent test authority to do the analysis from everything on looking at all of the structures and the audit logs of that computer and perform the battery of tests that they do. And I know that they offer this as post-election services to election officials all across the country and verify definitively whether or not such a thing happened.
Does the software is it your design within the software that Dominion designs to keep security logs that would flag unauthorized alteration of the code?
Yes, absolutely. And there's also ways for election officials to check that. And with every ballot scan that we do when we're talking about digital adjudication, we actually have a audit mark appended to a version to the saved ballot image that can show to any concerned citizen, any voter, a clear understanding of what the ballot was that was scanned and how the tabulator interpreted that.
What's the how would we understand? Would there be some sort of flagging that would happen, though, that would cause poll workers to look? Would an error message come up? Would the machinery stop working? Or would this only be caught if somebody were to perform an audit?
Oh, the machinery would stop working, and you could always check by going through the audit marked images of the ballots that were scanned.
And
that's above, and that's not even before we get into an independent verification from an ITA.
Now, the security of that computer that is hooked even to that local network or the digital adjudication, the security protocols that are put in place on there, does your company set a standard and provide instructions to the local workers on all of the security settings that that computer should have? Is that something that comes from the state of Michigan? Does it come preset? Where do those security standards and settings get placed, or who does them?
Well, all of the settings that are allowable for use as part of a federal certification are specifically specified in that certification. And in addition, layering on top of that, they have to be allowed by the state of Michigan during their process. Ultimately, the physical security of the entire system, including possession of the paper ballots themselves, and the scanners that do the high-speed scanning of absentee ballots, are all under the control of the local election official.
What can you tell us about the various documentaries, news reports, and other things, both right now, contemporary, ones that I've seen from even 10 years ago, that show university professors and professional hackers demonstrating how quickly they're able to compromise election tabulators?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chair McBroom. If you're referring to, for example, the one that I'm familiar with is, I think, the 7-minute hack. The researcher, the professor from, I believe, Princeton University, that originally published this video, or if it's a video or an article, he's one of, I think, 50 or so signatories on a letter that specifically addressed this election. And how they are completely different systems. So I have seen some of these videos that you're referencing. They reference legacy systems that were developed and installed prior to the EAC's VVSG 2005 standards. And they certainly were designed and deployed prior to a lot of the rigorous standards that we see across the states, specifically California certification, New York certification. And ultimately, I keep saying this: paper. The 7-minute hack, the databases on the old Access or whatever system that they were using back in 2000 didn't feature voter verifiable paper ballots. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, were the ballots securely stored, and you always have a copy of them, and they're distributed at your local counties under lock and key and sealed. That is, at the end of the day, how you can trust your election.
One of the things that's, particularly troubling from just a pure, easy, transparent process in Michigan's voting is the imbalance of poll books. And I understand that, that imbalance is not necessarily because of software or equipment, but is usually attributed to the poll workers and the handling of the ballots. But is that imbalance something that Dominion looks into, and in its post-election work and, would you say, autopsy? Does Dominion look at the imbalance of poll books and discuss with your customers whether any of that has to do with the tabulators and the software?
Chair McBroom, that's really a question for the election investigators, both at the county, at the state level. So again, I'm not aware of anything that has been found to be credible. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, we really, our part of the process is very limited to providing tabulation technology so that poll workers can use that technology to accurately count paper ballots, which is what they do.
Senator Tice says she has a to-the-point question there. Please.
Just with respect to the poll books, I believe the entirety of our electronic poll books were designed by Michigan for Michigan and are unique to Michigan. They have nothing to do with Dominion.
Okay, thank you, Senator. I'd like us to take
Just a few touch-up, and I won't go any further than we can take a break.
if you want to take a few quick questions, then we'll take a break, and then I think we'll be able to wrap up.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Lucido.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And this is interesting. I'm having a good time with this. It's hard to understand it, but does Dominion have any way to remotely access any of the information on any of the equipment or have remote access within the machines themselves?
No.
So there is no modem at all in these machines?
The only modem is the one that I described that has a very, very particular function on the precinct, and we do not have access to it, and nor can we modem into that machine.
Does anybody have access to the best of your knowledge?
No.
Okay, but it has what is it they call those, USB port on the machine. I saw it myself, right? What's the USB port?
I'm not sure which machine you're referring to.
I'm not sure either. I didn't get a
have,
serial number, but there is USB ports on machines that you build, correct?
no, I don't mean to be facetious, Senator. What did the machine look like? Was it a touchscreen?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, there is.
Okay.
And so that touchscreen is a ballot marking device. Mm-hmm. It does not tabulate votes. So it's just a pen. It's an expensive, fancy pen that allows for voters of any abilities, any physical ability, language ability, to privately and independently create a paper ballot that can be cast by them privately and independently.
So if there was no wireless modems included or deployed in Dominion machines or equipment, could someone, let's say a hacker, that's the best way I can say this, connect a modem to do something that should not be done, which is affect the vote?
Well, Senator, if we're talking about a polling place in Michigan, we're likely talking about two pieces of equipment that come from Dominion. One is that touchscreen that it sounds like that you've seen that does have a USB key that's obviously locked and sealed. And then there's another machine that is a paper scanner that sits atop a physically secure ballot box. As I said, the ballot marking device does not tabulate votes. It is nothing more than an electronic pen, if you will. A voter interfaces with that ballot marking device, but at the end of it walks away with a piece of paper that has a clear written summary of who that voter voted for. And that is the chance that the voter has to physically hold their ballot and to review their selections prior to casting it. So to my knowledge, a hacker, if they tried to put any kind of an external device on that VMD, it would fall upon the security of both the lock and the seal. So A, we'd know about it, and B, it's part of a polling location that has physical security of the poll workers and the poll watchers.
How would you know about it? You just said that we would know about it, because that was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah. Well, first of all,
do you have some kind of signal?
Would know about it.
Is there a signal that says error? Is there a signal that says there's an error or there's a compromise?
Well, there's several mechanisms that are built in that will not allow it. And as soon as the software is even attempted to change, it would shut itself down. But
that didn't happen.
But to that point,
County, did it?
I'm sorry?
That didn't happen with the machinery that was built in Antrim County, did it? It didn't stop the machine and said, don't accept the vote. It kept accepting votes.
No, yeah. I don't think anyone has, no one is alleging that somebody broke in.
Okay, no, we're not saying, no, don't get me wrong. No, we didn't say hack. We didn't say the word hack. But there was an error and it was a human error according to the clerk, which, let me get through these few questions. If you can't remotely access it, Dominion, what were these 2 employees or 3 employees or how many employees doing at the TCF Center What were they doing there from your company?
So I think you started the question asking about Antrim County. We did not have any.
No, I want to
any
withdraw.
employees.
I'll withdraw the questions for time's consideration in your time, and I appreciate you coming. Be specific. What were they doing in Wayne County at the TCF Center that they were employed by Wayne County? That's what you said, right? They weren't employed by the Secretary of State, were they?
No, okay, so we're not talking about Antrim County anymore.
No.
We're only talking about TCF Center.
Right.
And we had two, to my knowledge, we had two Dominion employees and one-day contractor. So they're discharging their duty as directed by election officials. So specifically cleaning machines, answering technical questions from election officials, but it's always done at the direction of the election official. There are strict instructions those employees are not running the election, so they should never be confused with running the election.
I didn't.
It could be as simple as cleaning. One of the most common things is cleaning the glass read head of a high-speed scanner, because as you might imagine, when you're scanning tens of thousands of pieces of paper, it actually is a pretty dirty process, and flecks from the paper accumulate in the scanning bed of the scanner that needs to be cleaned properly.
Would there be any reason? Would there be any reason for these two individuals, as you've indicated, to employ any third parties to be there also?
To employ any third parties? You mean contractors? Well, one of them was
contractors, agents, anybody else?
So we contracted with one contractor who I believe testified to your House hearing.
So you have viewed these hearings online?
I have not seen all of the hearings. I've seen snippets. I've obviously seen the testimony from the contractor that we hired for a day.
And who was that one? What was the name of the contractor you hired for the day, so we have it for the record?
Melissa Carone, I believe.
Okay. And that was the only one that the two other contractors or two other employees from Dominion hired, Ms. Corona, is that correct?
I believe her name was Ms. Carone. So of the three people that were there, sir, two of them were employees of Dominion, and one of them we hired as a one-day contractor.
Okay. And these three individuals, I'm going to ask, was there training involved with the two employees that went to the TCF Center? And was there an outline of delegation of duties in which they had when they went to the TCF Center? Meaning, did they go with, this is what the scope of work is, this is what you're going to be paid, and this is what you're going to carry out on behalf of Dominion?
Right. So specifically, the contractor was hired from the temp agency. And she was, for us, one of several thousand one-day contractors. Her role was really limited to a type 1 type of technician who provides, she would have been told how to clean the glass read heads, or at least she should have been. But really, the main job is flagging down if there's any questions in technical nature that election officials have to flag down one of the two Dominion engineers who were there who could answer the question.
Was there any tallies or any evaluations that went back to the company by these two employees from the TCF Center outlining what, if any, issues were raised at the TCF Center? Like an evaluation. I don't know,
sir.
I couldn't hear you.
I said I don't know, sir.
Who would be the one that would be charged with that duty if you don't know? So we could get something back as far as feedback go, what they claim happened at the TCF Center. Because we heard a lot of testimony,
I can certainly gather that for you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, at this time, there was only one question. It was doing with jamming of the machine. Does the tabulators, if a machine jams, go ahead and recalculate if the vote was already counted?
Are you referring to the central scanners that were at the TCF Center?
I am. We heard testimony that they have to go through batches. And if the batches are not deleted when they scan and it gets jammed up, The system then will run a ballot 2 and 3 times or 10 times through. This was the testimony, Mr. Polis, that we heard. I'm asking you, because you build a machine, if the machine itself is jamming and it doesn't then tabulate, or it jams it up and somebody pulls a ballot out, how do you know in the machine if it already calculated that ballot?
Yeah, I did see the testimony, and from my recollection, if there were ballots that were scanned multiple times, the audit would be off from the voter registration and the poll book records as part of the canvass process.
Why don't we stop right there, Mr. Chairman? I want to pick up that end about the poll being off so that we can see the process.
That sounds good to me. We'll take one last break, come back and finish up. Thank you, Mr. Polis. The committee is
great.
recessed for 10 minutes.
Thank you.
The Senate Committee on Oversight will return to order. Thank you, members, for your return. And let's continue, and hopefully this will be kind of our last segment. And then we do have, we'll finish this committee, adjourn, and then we'll bring the committee back to order on another meeting that's in another different location. So if you're wondering what the second posting is about, that's for our joint meeting with the House briefly to adopt some additional subpoenas. So that's why it's set up that way. Okay. Mr. Polis, continue to have my thanks for your participation today. Could you share with us, when it comes to the software, do you design it to operate on a Windows platform or Unix? I mean, what operating system do counties have on the computers that they're putting your software on?
Depending on the system we use, I know we operate on different platforms, including Linux and Windows.
Okay. And the tabulators themselves, they don't have an operating system in them?
Oh, they do. The tabulator, well, there's various tabulators, but I believe the tabulators that are used in Michigan at the polling location are Linux operating system.
Okay.
I'll have to confirm that, but I'm fairly confident on that.
Okay, and a slight shift of gear here to another question. You're, of course, doing software updates and providing version updates to the state, correct?
So I think, I'm not sure what you're getting at. We are not able to update software like you would a normal computer at your home. Any update that we provide, any change to any line of source code, any piece of hardware has to go through federal certification first. And once it is approved for use, then we can provide the update, and that update is usually done by the election officials themselves.
So, and that's fine. I appreciate that detail. What I'm wondering is...
I'd actually give you an example. So,
okay, thank you.
You have a desktop, you have a server that's air-gapped that sits in your county's central location. Even though Microsoft might want an update, even though antivirus might need an update, there is no updates are done that unless they first go through federal certification.
Oh, even for the virus software and other materials like that?
That's correct.
Okay.
So there's absolutely nothing in our system. The entire environment has to be come from as certified as such.
But as you're, and where I wanted to go, and this is all valuable information, so I appreciate that. Where I wanted to go with the question, why I'm asking, you're developing and designing software updates, correct? New versions.
Yes.
So prior to you sending those to the EAC for certification, what does Dominion do to check and test the security, the vulnerability of the software before it sends it out for certification?
Okay, I see. So we do our own extensive testing that really mirrors a lot of the testing that is done at the EAC level, except that we do it internally to ourselves. Sometimes that is done directly with our own employees. Sometimes we contract with external labs to do vulnerability testing, for example, or various types of security reviews on our systems.
Those third-party labs that you would contract with, are they certified by the EAC as well? How do you control who's looking at your materials to test it?
The labs that we use are usually accredited and recommended by federal authorities that are well trained in this area. In the case of state certifications, California comes to my mind. They do their own security testing with their own independent authorities that they separately accreditate and certify.
In the EAC's accreditation process, are they interested in security and vulnerability issues, or are they primarily interested in the fidelity of counting votes?
Well, I don't wish to speak for the EAC, but I think it's a very fair guess to say that they're concerned about every aspect of the voting system, including security and accuracy, reliability, and operating environment.
But I mean, you must get reports back from them after you send your materials to them for accreditation. I mean, do they?
Yes, it's publicly available on their website.
With a rubric they use for going through the materials?
I don't understand the question, sir.
Well, I mean, do they have a standard list of benchmarks that they're looking for when they evaluate the software?
Oh, yes, there are. I'm going to probably get it wrong, but it's thousands of pages of guidelines through. It's called the Voluntary Voting System Guidelines. The latest and greatest is named the VVSG 2005, and there are literally thousands of lines of pages of requirements.
And so,
and that document absolutely does outline testing guidelines.
And so, you send this software off to them for certification, and it doesn't meet some particular benchmark that they want. I assume they provide that feedback to you and say you have to harden this area up or rewrite this area. I mean, so you get that kind of feedback from the EAC?
I'm not sure. I presume we do.
Okay.
I'm not really the certification person, so I'm not sure of the day-to-day interaction when we're in a certification campaign.
Okay.
But I can certainly get that information for you.
Thank you. In your opening remarks, I believe you mentioned the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Yes, I did.
As a reference. Is this a separate accrediting agency that you also have to send the software to?
No, it is the EAC in their process of accrediting independent testing authorities has a separate process for doing that, and they rely on NIST for a part of that.
Okay, so by being accredited by the EAC, do you then receive, that you've followed the proper guidelines for the NIST?
I really can't speak to that. We are not an accredited independent testing authority by the EAC, so I'm not an expert on that by any means.
Okay. Was there a significant version update or change leading into the 2020 election? Or are we still operating on the same version from Dominion that we operated under in 2018?
I'm not sure what version off the top of my head that you're operating on in Michigan. I can certainly find that out for you, though.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Lucido has some additional follow-up? Or no, I'm sorry, Senator Tice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your patience. I know we've got you sitting in the hot seat for a long time, so thank you very much. I appreciate your patience.
Sure.
I want to cover a few of the rumors that I'm getting lambasted with, and I just want to make sure that we've got them out front and you can answer them. So given the recent disclosures regarding foreign nationals at high levels of everywhere, government and everything, how do you know that you're protecting your source code and that they're not embedded in your organization doing something with your source code?
Well, that's something that the EAC and through its ITAs and the state agencies do. They do a line-by-line review of all of our source code. And so specifically with regards to one of the rumors that certainly I've read and reread is that somehow source code has embedded its way into Dominion systems that somehow originated in Venezuela. That is not the case. Any independent test authority, and there's several of them that have reviewed all our code, could verify this. And in fact, it is my understanding that the Secretary of State's office in California has certified both our software along with competitive software from companies like ES&S and Hart and Smartmatic. And so perhaps they're the best ones to answer a question to verify that there's no common source code. But it's something certainly I can attest to on for Dominion systems.
Thank you very much. I also have been told that there were at least, there were more than 2 of your direct employees and 1 indirect, that there were as many as 9 in the TCF Center. I don't know that that's necessarily a problem, but that's the information that I have in front of me. I'm not going to give any names in the interest of, you know, all the issues that you described earlier. I certainly would prefer that people remain protected and not threatened. But I would be interested in having that information if there's any mistake, and then what their roles were in the process, right? What were their responsibilities while they were there? I also heard that you received a large sum of money from outside the country just recently, actually just before the election. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I've heard that one too. Unfortunately, it's not true. This one's bizarre and completely unfounded. And I think the claim is something like a Swiss bank through Chinese intermediaries paid the company that owns Dominion. But I can tell you that that's not true under oath.
Okay, thank you for that. And then your equipment, your adjudicators and your tabulators in the TCF, do they have Ethernet access?
No, they're not connected. As I said, they're not connected to the internet. They're designed to be completely standalone system. They are connected locally in a local area network designed to be separate from the internet.
So then they don't have an Ethernet set up in order to be a part of the LAN or Ethernet for any other reason?
Sorry. Yes, they do. So to connect the computers in a local area network, they are connected through, I believe, an RJ45 connector.
Okay.
Through a switch that is not connected to the outside world.
So what processes do you go through just to make sure? I'm assuming that you're very, very careful in making sure that you're maintaining the highest level of safety, because you just were speaking to the hackers convention and all of the things that are going on. We just heard about our Treasury getting hacked, and we know how often the governmental entities that people are making efforts to do that. I'm assuming that as you're working on your systems, that there is a point where there could be access to it before this information gets pushed out and updated into the different states. What efforts do you take to make sure that this system is as protected as it could possibly be, so that it's not accessible to nefarious people?
Well, there's several things that we do. We are part of a federal program of coordinated vulnerability disclosure. We routinely send our equipment to white hat hackers for vulnerability testing. We obviously rely and follow EAC guidelines very closely. We work collaboratively with our customers who do their own vulnerability testing through their own independent test agencies. To that end. I don't recall us talking about a hacker convention. Maybe that was during the break. But we've even expressed interest at participating in a hacker convention as long as it made sense in terms of some semblance of real life ballot security, as opposed to just ripping apart machines in a way that's obviously would be detected. We actually, if you've heard of the DEF CON conference that this year I believe it was canceled, but the one that happened in 2019, we had an agreement with Mr. Braun. We actually sent equipment there, and that invitation was revoked, unfortunately, while we were there. But these types of things are not new for us. Our first vulnerability testing happened in New York in 2008, and we've done several since.
So in the event that you were to see a vulnerability or experience a vulnerability, do you have a process in place to respond to it? I'm hesitant to ask you what that process would be because I think that might weaken it, but...
there's a very well documented process in California where it's required I think it's within 20 days. We strive to report it as soon as we are aware of any vulnerability or report or any problem. From an internal standpoint, we are very collaborative with our customers in discussing our own internal security testing and vulnerability practices.
Thank you very much. As always happens, I usually end up coming up with 25 questions after we're no longer talking. I would love the opportunity in the future to send a letter or something, or perhaps have you in the future if those come up. Thank you very much for being available to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tice. Senator McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I realize we're short on time, so I'll be brief. I just got a couple questions. With regard to TCF, we have sworn testimony that the machines had physical and wireless networks active. We also understand that according to your testimony moments ago, the equipment may not have had the latest software antivirus patches in place. In light of this, would you consider it to be impossible for an on-premise or local network adversary to gain access to one or more machines or computers, especially if they were well-versed in the source code? Would it be impossible for anything to be manipulated?
So first, let me start off by saying, if there has been any testimony that has been found to be credible by a judge or by an election official, I'm not aware of it. I've testified today that our systems are designed to be in a closed area network, and that we do not have wireless capability on our systems. So does that answer your question?
Somewhat. Is it impossible to breach it? Yes or no?
I certainly think so.
Okay.
But then again, even if it was possible, it'd certainly be detectable. And at the end of the day, I keep coming back to the paper ballots because there's a good reason for it. Even if ballots, if anything like what you're suggesting is possible, and I certainly don't think it is, and if there's sworn testimony that something happened, I'm not aware of it if it's been found to be independently credible. But the paper ballots would not match the result of the county canvass process. And that's so in terms of the accuracy of the tabulation, as long as you're able to complete and certify a canvass process, you would know that your ballots were accurately counted because you've got the ballots still in your possession.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question, sir. Can you provide the checksums of the voting software when it was certified, and can they be compared with what is currently on the voting machines?
So absolutely, you shouldn't get that from us. You should get that from certification agencies and the independent test labs, and that is a part of regular post-election reviews.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Mr. Polis, how are the employees, not so much for, well, even at Dominion, how do you go about checking them, make sure that they don't have foreign connections? I think that was a question that Senator Tice kind of started on, but then went in a different direction. So what is your process for assuring that that there isn't some sort of illicit influence or going on with the programming?
We do very extensive background checks on our employees through third parties. This is part of our voluntary disclosure that we have with our state partners. As it pertains to our contract employees, we employ third-party temp firms. And part of their obligations and accountability is to do background checks, criminal checks, and the like.
And what about the background then of those who use as third-party vendors for hardware, technical know-how? Are you checking those sources as well?
Well, for that type of work, we work with EAC recommended ITAs.
And they maintain security checks, background checks on those that they're making recommendations for?
Yes, they do.
Completely different, complete switch here then in line of questioning. The digital images of the ballots, is this something that's only taken of absentee ballots, or are there digital images taken of the ballots that are done in in-person polling places as well?
Digital images can be recorded on all of our paper scanners.
And are those, is that done? I mean, is every ballot made an image of?
It's a county by county decision. So in the case of Antrim County, I can tell you that they were not recorded, which is how we know for certain, above all of the other checks, that digital adjudication could not have been used there.
And so for those who do take digital images of the ballots, what are those files as far as security goes? How can we be sure they don't become modified later?
Well, they are digitally encrypted and signed and securely stored in 2 different places. And ultimately, they would have to match the paper ballots.
Okay. Do any other members have any additional follow-ups at this time? Well, Mr. Polis, again, we want to thank you for making yourself available to us, and I hope that you will avail yourself if we ask you to come back. I would certainly try to assure you it would be a shorter time period if we did have to have you come back and do some additional follow-up, and I would likely want to, kind of gather the questions that we might have, such as Senator Tice mentioned, get them written down, send them to you, and then ask you to come in and do a brief follow-up with us to answer any questions that we either don't really have fully developed in our minds right now or might come to us here in the next day or two. I hope that would be acceptable to you.
Chair McBroom, I appreciate the opportunity for having me and giving me an opportunity to correct a lot of the record of what's been said.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Brower as well, thank you for your attention today too.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and to the committee. And if the chair or the committee does have follow-up questions, we'd be happy to consider anything in writing you might want to submit. We'll look forward to getting that from you. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Members, I will see you across the street at Bogie Tower when the Senate Oversight Committee next convenes, which will be shortly. So, Paul, is that still correct? We're coordinating with the House, but yes. So please head there somewhat directly. Yes. So, Vice Chair Lucido moves that the Senate Oversight Committee adjourn. Hearing no objections, we're adjourned.